Now, during the medieval time, the Catholic Church was a mega corporation that was able to sell a product called salvation, which costed almost nothing to make, but it was very expensive to purchase. For instance, one of the schemes that they devised was a spiritual penalty reduction coupon in the form of an indulgence tax. I know it sounds batshit crazy today, but back then, no, they actually did it. It was the medieval version of carbon credits. You know, like human activity produces carbon, and so it can be taxed. Well, in medieval time, it was like sin emission. Like human activity produces sin, and so it can be taxed. Of course, they didn't really call it a tax. It was voluntary. But if you were a noble and you wanted to have good relationship with the church and also be viewed as a pious person, you had to buy at least a couple. And especially when sin, like everything else that humans do, can be quantified. The noble kind of suspects like how much he is going to sin next year. He could have a little bit of the treasury set aside specifically to buy these things. The same thing with wealthy merchants. Like they too knew how much sin they're producing on average per year. And so they would dedicate a specific amount of the treasury to buy these things. Now, what happens when parts of the treasuries are dedicated for that? Well, usually taxes increase, products start costing more. And so even though the tax was kind of voluntary, the reality is that still the little guy had to pay it because their own taxes would go up as well as the market would become more expensive. This is why I love comparing it with the carbon tax from today that comes from the European Union. At the end of the day, yes, like big corporations need to pay it, but the price trickles down all the way to the consumer. Now, the way the church justified this is that they believed sin has two issues. The first issue of sin is that of guilt, which can be forgiven through confession and absolution. But it also came with the temporal punishment, the after effects of sin, which could be worked through penance in life. And this type of penance was initially tied to pilgrimages or fasting. However, with time, it, obviously became tied to money. Like the idea of spending money in order to buy this indulgence was part of the quote-unquote temporal punishment. Now, take into account that many people are unaware just how the Catholic Church operated in a medieval society. Most people think that the Catholic Church of today is pretty similar to the Catholic Church of the year 1300, for instance. And the answer is absolutely not. Back then, the Mass was held in Latin. So when you'd go to church, what you'd see is the priest facing away from the congregation and chanting in a bizarre language that nobody would understand. And that was how religious Mass was being performed back then. Most people didn't know the Bible at all, except for what the priest would tell them, and except for what was being drawn on the church's walls. And so they were more familiar with the saints painted on the murals than they were with Jesus' Sermon on the Mount where he says, "Blessed are the meek." Most peasants at the time, they knew about Jesus as the Son of God, and they knew that he resurrected, and they knew that he was a very kind man, which healed the blind. But they didn't know his philosophy in detail. And most people back then lived in a lot of superstitions. For instance, sailors would pray to whatever saint was considered to guard navigation. Merchants would have their own saint. In England, for instance, they would pray to St. George. So despite the fact that we're looking at Christianity as a monotheistic religion, most people were practicing saint worship with the idea that, just like a peasant doesn't go to the king personally to make petitions, instead he goes to his noble, and the noble then carries the petition to the king if he believes that the petition is worthy. So too, you can't go to God and pray directly. Instead, you go to the saint, which is closer to you as a human being, and then the saint carries your petition all the way to God. Again, this is because peasants didn't have understanding of the Bible at all. Nobody has read it. And when they went to sermons, nobody would hear it. They would hear ancient Latin. And so you can understand why the church, as a earthly institution, was able to grift unquestioned and unchallenged for hundreds of years. They had complete narrative control. All the way until Martin Luther in 1517 decides to make a Twitter post. And I call it a Twitter post because that's literally what he did. He posted it on the church door. And that's actually a way that people at the time used to bring up debates. So Martin Luther wasn't just anyone. He actually had a doctorate degree, if you will, the equivalent of. And so he was actually allowed to have these debates. And the debates were done by, well, posting them on the church door, literally with a hammer, nailing it. And he nails a list of 95 issues. 95 issues that were quite problematic for the church. Now, you see, Martin Luther wasn't like a cheeky atheist. Like, he wasn't like a Redditor that was coming out in order to try to attack religion and be like, oh, well, you know, if God is good, why do bad things happen? Like, no. He wasn't like that. The problem is that the 95 questions that he asked were pretty fucking based. Like, for instance, if the Pope can actually forgive people from sin, and he's the vicar of Christ, and he holds the keys to the gate of heaven, and he's acting like a mob boss, and it's like, hey, Peter, you let this guy in, right? He's good. This guy is good. Like, I vouch for him, right? If the Pope can do that, why isn't he vouching for everybody out of pure love and compassion? Isn't this what Jesus said? And also, amongst the other 95 things, maybe a little bit of questioning the divine right to rule and feudal society. Like, for example, in 1517, you now have some peasants that are able to read. And they're looking at the Bible and they don't really see that hierarchy where society is spread between those who lead, those who fight, those who pray, and those who labor. Instead, what they see is that God created everyone in the same image. And now that Martin Luther is coming up and he's nailing that to the door, well, that argument starts to seem very persuasive for the peasants, wondering like, hold on a little bit, why are we putting up with their shit? And then you also have certain princes in the Holy Roman Empire that were always asserted on the fact that they couldn't tax the church and that the church was extremely wealthy and the monasteries were filled with priceless relics. They had a lot of gold and silver that the prince probably wanted his government to have. And by the government, we are actually talking about his own royal treasury. And also the monasteries were filled with land that people worked there and he couldn't tax properly. And the only reason that he tolerated this is because if he tried to do anything about it, well, his own middle class nobility and even peasantry would rise up. And while you can't put down a peasant rebellion, it comes with killing peasants, which comes with bringing famine because no one is plowing the land. So if you can avoid that, it's best you do. But now you basically have Martin Luther that is very convincing to the peasantry. And so when the prince goes like, do you mind if I take this land from the church? And the peasants go like, no, go ahead. While in other places where perhaps the prince was still Catholic, the peasants would be like, hold on a little bit. Why is it that we're born subjects and these people are born good? Like, you can have an emperor that's flat out retarded because of inbreeding and he is still supposed to govern over us. And there's no way for us to escape our position. Like, we're not even allowed to learn Latin and we're not allowed to read and write. Yeah, we don't like that. And so they rebelled. And so the rebellion had to be put down. And so famine happened. And on top of that, you get like little civil wars happening in the Holy Roman Empire. And so if we dial it back a little bit, what Martin did with what Martin Luther nailed on a door, expecting a debate, he got a response from the Pope saying, delete this. And when he refused to delete this, consequences followed.
He walked up with a hammer, oh so bold. nailed his thoughts to the wood. No go gold. Questions for the Pope, a list of 95. Hey Pope, can we talk? Are these taxes justified? But oh no, what came next? Not a chat, not a text, just delete. The human cost, millions gone, lives were lost. Swing the sword, let it soar, history's war. Oh, what marching feet, battles roar, cheerful tunes on a bloody floor. Delete this, you said, but wait, what's this? Not like last, not like that. Oh, Luther didn't mean this. From Wittenberg to Rome, the word spread fast, but reason drowned in a cannon.